Okay, the circulatory system. Circulatory system is made of your, just like I said in the notes, of your heart, right? Your veins and arteries, and your blood. Now, the circulatory system is the center of just about everything that's going on in your body. Now, like here, you see the sketch we did in class, and this is kind of a more professionally drawn one from the internet. You need to understand that when you're talking about your circulatory system, not only is it intricately connected to your lungs, it's also connected to your digestive system and every possible system in your body, because it's this heart that pumps these fluids around in your body, allows for that exchange to occur. When you're talking about the veins, all this blood's coming back from these tiny little blood vessels that we call capillaries that we'll look at in just a second. They come here at this capillary bed here, or this capillary bed down here. And you'll see that these capillaries, the blood starts flowing through the capillaries, and when it starts, each and every connection makes the vessels, the tubes, if you will, get bigger and bigger. And it starts at the capillary, very tiny, and then out here, we're here at the capillary, we're talking about one cell at a time coming through those little tiniest tubes at the tiniest possible scale. As they get bigger and bigger, they combine into what we call venules. The venules are just a little larger they're larger than capillaries, but smaller than veins. And then here they turn into veins, and then these veins then combine into the biggest one, the vena cava. There's an inferior vena cava here, and a superior vena cava up here. Now it's a closed system, so remember, you see how everything's connected, and it just circulates. That's why we call this up here this is the pulmonary circuit. Here's the superior systemic circuit. Here's the inferior systemic circuit. So when you're looking at this, again, these blanks, please do not try to fill in each of these blanks and think that I'm going to test those. That's not what I'm testing. What I'm looking for is kind of a general idea. Do you understand this is the heart? Do you know that you better know what is the left atrium or the right atrium, that the right atrium is taking in the blood from both the superior system and the inferior system, and that it's taking it into the right ventricle. That from that right ventricle it goes into the pulmonary artery. That's the only artery in the body with a very low oxygen. From that it goes into the capillary bed in the lungs, where oxygen is exchanged for carbon dioxide. Oxygen comes in, carbon dioxide goes out, and then it goes into the pulmonary vein. That pulmonary vein is the smallest, not the smallest, but the pulmonary vein is the only vein in the body that has oxygen in it. And from the pulmonary vein, from both lungs, you see there's two branches for everything because you have two lungs. You have that pulmonary, left atrium, which is taking the blood in from the lungs, oxygenated, going in the left ventricle. That left ventricle then sends the blood out to the body through the aorta. The aorta splits, one goes up and goes into the brain and the thoracic cavity, upper thoracic cavity and brain, the head region and head and neck region, and then of course it goes down, and the down part is taking care of the trunk and the abdomen. Okay? So when we're taking a look at this is basically the circulatory system right here. It's all drawn for you. Do I want you to know the details of, this is what I want you to know about the system. Right atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle, pulmonary artery. There's two of them, right? You can see them here, one here, one here. You need to know that they have arterioles, which are smaller. Capillaries are smallest. Venules, it keeps going through the venules, is bigger, into the vein, and then goes back to the left atrium, from the left atrium to the ventricle, from the ventricle to the body, and again goes around in this system. The tinier, they get very small, and then they get big again, and at each level you have either capillary, which is in between vein and artery going away from the blood, arterial going away from the heart, artery going away from the heart, arterial going away from the heart but smaller than an artery. You have capillary, then you have vein, venule, that's small, that's going away from the heart. Oh, sorry, I messed that up again. Going towards the heart, venule, going from capillary to venule, going towards the heart. The venules come together to form a vein, again going towards the heart and going into the giant vein called the vena cava that goes towards the heart. The inferior vena cava, you see it here, number 10. You see the superior vena cava, that's here, number 9, feeding into the right atrium, that's number 11, going into the right ventricle, that's number 1, and the circulatory keeps going. Every pump of your heart sends this blood throughout your system. Okay, so let's take a look at what this actually looks like. This is actually very cool. It's from an art exhibit where they've taken actual human bodies and they've digested away they injected the veins with red dyes. Here they injected the arteries with red and the veins with blue. And this is actually, these are your lungs. Without the tissue, without the alveoli, just the circulatory system, just the arteries and veins. This is your heart. There's the red oxygenated blood. Here's the blue deoxygenated blood. And you see that what they've done here is amazing. You see that every centimeter of your body has blood vessels that are feeding it, all in your hands. So that's why when you cut your hand here, you cut your finger there, you're going to get bleeding because you're cutting the tubes that contain the blood. Look at how many blood vessels you have at the fingertips. A lot. Look at these giant these arteries here coming down. Giant arteries. You see people that are in shape. You can actually see the arteries and veins. Well, here's all the muscle, all the other tissue digested away, and you're left with this amazing a sculpture of the arteries of your arm and your hand. And here you have that same sculpture when it comes to your liver, to your left lung, your right lung, your right lung, your left lung, your right atrium and ventricle, your left atrium and ventricle here. Hard to tell which was which in this case. You see the pulmonary artery or vein coming here. It looks like it's a vein. Yeah, it looks like it's a vein coming back because it's red. So it's amazing what they were able to do with these sculptures. So okay, let's take a real close look here at what we're talking about when we're talking about a vein and an artery. Okay, because I know this can be confusing, so I'm going to break it down real simple. Here's that word lumen again. Lumen just means space. In your veins and arteries, you have it's just a tube that has a space inside. That's what a tube is, right? But there's a muscle around it that allows the artery to squeeze close or dilate open to allow more blood in or less blood, more blood through or less blood through. And it has this, then of course it branches off. So you have this big artery. It's called artery because it's big. The blood's moving away from the heart. And it starts to split off into these smaller vesicles that we call arterioles. The arterioles are taking that blood to what we call a capillary bed. And here at the capillaries, you see that this is, if you took a cross section, you cut it up. If you cut this here, you sliced it, you looked at it from the front. So if you looked at it going in this direction, if you looked at it going this way, all right, what you would see is this picture here. Now this is an arteriole. That's the size of an arteriole. Now you made the same cross section here, you cut it. This is what the capillaries would look like. Of course, the center here, that big one in the center of this capillary bed is this arteriole, is this kind of arteriole here. It's still big enough to be an arteriole. So these capillaries are very small, and what you see when you look at these capillaries is that there's one blood cell. Because see how this is one red blood cell, also known as an erythrocyte, and that one blood cell is the only thing that fits through that capillary. So here the blood is full of oxygen and nutrients. It goes through this one blood cell. What happens is the oxygen and nutrients leaves the blood, leaves the erythrocyte, goes into the tissues. Here's all your tissues. And maybe it's a neuron, maybe it's a liver cell, maybe it's a muscle cell, whatever. Oxygen and nutrients go out to that tissue, and what comes into the vein or artery, into this capillary, is the waste from the tissues and the carbon dioxide that comes from, which is part of the waste from the body. It goes back into the blood. That blood that's now higher in waste and decreased in oxygen concentration, nutrient concentration, starts to go through these little venules. These are the smaller veins that start to feed into the big vein. Now these veins have valves that don't allow for the blood to go back down. They actually only allows the blood to go one way. So up through the blood and keeps going out. Now if the blood ever slows down in the veins, because there's not as much pressure over here as there is in an artery. An artery has much more pressure than a vein does. So this valve allows the blood not to flow backwards, but keeps the blood moving back towards your heart. Okay, and you want the blood to move in that direction towards your heart. And since it's moving towards your heart, we call this a vein. This is moving from your heart, so we call this an artery. Pretty straightforward. Oh, by the way, you never heard of varicose veins? Well, those kind of old, as we get older, some of us have these veins that you see in the legs, kind of a lot of blue, real deep blue veins in people's legs or arms as they get older. Well, that's because their valves aren't working that well, and more of the blood pools in the veins, and so they kind of swell up a little bit, and that's what you'll get. You'll get that real deep blue, especially if someone has lighter skin color. You'll see that deep blue in their legs. It's just an artifact of getting older. These valves start to wear down a little bit. So the circulatory system starts to wear down a little bit as we get older. So this is it. These are the main ideas of the circulatory system. The heart, all the things in the previous slide that shows you, you've recorded off the notes on the board. Just really step by step. This is the aorta. This is the pulmonary artery. This is the pulmonary vein. This is the way the blood circulates. This is a capillary. What's an artery? What's a vein? What happens? Where do these things that the blood is inside tubes? You're not a sack of blood. All your blood is inside the tubes unless something's wrong, unless you're bleeding. So this is kind of the basis of the kind of detail that's going to be required for you to understand. I'm going to ask a question about just about everything here, because again, the circulatory system involves every other system in your body, because without pumping that blood, without moving that blood around, none of the other systems work.